Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video, I am going to be talking about my hydrocephalus that I don't even know how to introduce this video, y'all. So for those of you who may be seeing me for the first time, to give you the backstory, I survived an internal decapitation a year and a half ago. It was a freak thing, and then I had another freak complication of hydrocephalus, and it really complicated my recovery, and so that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. For my regular subscribers, just to give you a heads up, if you see me moving weird or just if I look a little different, if I'm moving a little different, I'm having a lot of pain in my neck today. It's been going on about 24 hours. I've had a really rough time with it. So if something looks off to you, that's what's going on. I'm okay, just in a lot more pain and not really able to move around as well as I normally do. So for this video podcast, I will include some pictures as we go along. I'm also releasing this in audio only format for Spotify and other podcast platforms. So I'm going to try to speak in a way that it makes sense for those of you watching and also those of you listening. This story involves a physician that made a mistake, and we'll get more into that later, but I want to put a very large disclaimer right here that I in no way will tolerate any disparaging comments towards this physician. I will not say her name just to protect her, but she and I are good, and I'm really excited to talk about this openly, but I will delete any comments that say anything about a lawsuit or anything disparaging against her. I just want to make that very clear. This is something that happened to me. It is something that I experienced, and I want to talk about it. It's helpful for other people to hear these things. It's also helpful to learn from others' mistakes, and it's helpful for me to kind of be able to get it off my chest. This is just a very big part of my story that we've really not talked much about, but I have now had a chance to speak with that doctor personally after my speech at the event the other day, and it was really powerful. Not the speech, but getting to talk to her. And so now I feel a lot better about talking about what happened, and then I'll tell you more about her and I getting to speak to each other, and I'm excited to tell you about that because it was a very healing and powerful moment for me and seemed like for her too. So let's get into it. And if you're new here, by the way, this is Bailey, my African gray parrot that I inherited from my mother-in-law who recently passed away. He's on my shoulder because he is a tick, and that's where he likes to stay. And if I put him down, then he's just going to talk and scream and make all kind of racket, and he's much quieter on my shoulder. So that's why he's here. I tell people he is the executive producer of this podcast, and all decisions will be ran through him. Also, one more thing I would like to add. This story involves a lot of medical terminology, and I do have medical background knowledge as a paramedic, so I'm going to try to explain things for lay people, but also if you are a neurosurgeon or physician watching this and I say something that is incorrect, please feel free to correct me, and I will pin your comment to the top to make sure it is clear for everybody. So my accident occurred October 8th, 2021. I was internally decapitated. I was immediately put into a halo in the ER, and then once I was stabilized, I went up to neuro ICU, where the next 2 weeks were spent addressing all of my other injuries. And just to break those down for you again real quick, I injured my vertebral arteries, carotid arteries, I had lung damage, I broke my back in 3 places, I had a tibial plateau fracture, I almost cut my arm off, and had a bad brachial plexus injury. I had a lot of damage to my internal organs with bleeding and bruising and whatnot, and that came into play later. But that is the gist of my injuries, and for the first 2 weeks that I was in the hospital, they were focusing on all of those things. At some point, neuro released me from their service. This was after my internal fixation, where I had the back of my skull fused to the top of my spine. And fortunately, during the initial accident, I did not have any brain damage. All the CTs and the MRIs, the brain itself looked fine. It was just the internal decapitation. Not only was it an internal decapitation, but it was an extreme case in the way that the amount of separation I had from my neurosurgeon explaining it to me. My case was like the most severe on a patient that was still alive. And in fact, he told me the other day that when he showed my images to other neurosurgeons, they said, "Why did you operate on her?" And he said, "Well, she was alive." And from what he says, the imaging was really not compatible with life. Like, there's no explanation on, because there's people that have been internally decapitated and they get fused and they go about living a mostly normal life, but mine was a much more extreme. The amount of separation that I had, I was told it was like 3 to 4 times like survivable injury, somewhere between like 12 and 14 millimeters of separation is what I had. I think anything outside of 4 is considered unsurvivable. Again, this is what I recall from speaking to him. So if I had said something wrong, and please correct me, but that is what I recall from our conversations. So at some point within the first 2 weeks, I would have to go look through records, and it doesn't matter for the point of this video, but at some point I started to improve and was extubated, which means I had my breathing tube removed and I was taken off the ventilator, and things were improving. I think at that point, and I could be wrong, but I think at that point it was clear that I was gonna pull through this, and with some sort of neurological function, so my arm at that time was paralyzed, and I don't recall if they said it was temporary or if they didn't know. I just remember that I thought my arm was going to be paralyzed forever, and at that time, my biggest concern, and I know my family was really concerned about it too, was, am I going to be able to crochet again? Because that's something I do a lot. I enjoy it, and I'm really good at it, and it's a big part of my life, and it's really good for my mental health. So I remember being worried about am I going to be able to crochet again. And I also remember making everybody that came in my room sign their name in a little notebook with their mailing address, because I was going to go home and make everybody snickerdoodles because it was around the holidays. And it's funny to me now, but I was very serious about it. I wanted to make snickerdoodles and homemade caramel and send it out to everybody that was so good to me. I'm not sure how many days this went on, but at some point after I was extubated, I developed a headache, and that headache over several days continued to get worse and worse and worse. I was also vomiting a lot, so if you are a neuro ICU nurse, if you're in the medical field, it's probably, like us, hindsight's 2020, but you have to remember, I was in that halo, and when you're in a halo, you vertigo, it's normal to feel dizzy and have vertigo because you don't have a sense of weight in your, it's a weird feeling, but that's a normal side effect of a patient in a halo is vertigo. And I was having vertigo, I was vomiting a lot, I was miserable, and then the headache started. And again, you have to remember, I'm in neuro ICU. Every patient in there has got something going on neurologically, so I'm sure a headache is you should just have a CT scanner out in the hallway for all these patients, because if you scanned every single time somebody has a headache, they would never come out of the scanner. But at some point, the headache, it continued to get worse and worse and worse. And again, everybody's pain is subjective. So what may be a 10 to me could be a 5 to somebody else, or vice versa. I had all these other injuries, so it was not really, it just, should it have been taken more seriously? Looking back, yes, it should have, but it was missed. It was not a reach to assume that I had a lot going on. Of course, I've got a headache, but my husband at some point started getting very concerned because I was maxed out on fentanyl. I was just inconsolable. The pain was excruciating, and he said I looked like I had a bird nest in my halo because they were packing ice pack or cold packs on my head because just nothing was touching this headache. And the day that all this happened, he brought up his concerns to the doctor and said, look, we have a building headache that's just getting worse. I think something is wrong. I want to see neuro again. And he was told that that's not going to happen. And I think he and that doctor exchanged some words. I don't know. I don't remember. And Lee's I'm not going to put him through reliving this again. So I'm just going to tell you what he has told me. They had words. Lee was adamant that something was wrong, and the doctor was not convinced and didn't see a need at that time for another CT scan because all of my imaging up until that point had been normal. So Lee was in the room, and they were still trying to control my pain. The nurse that I had that day, I think it was her first time with me, and I've heard that she was pretty traumatized by all of this, but she had just given me some morphine. I don't know how much. But after she pushed the morphine, Lee said that my sats started dropping, and they got into the 80s and lower, and I think they eventually got into like the 30s or 40s when he started just freaking out. And I was told that he started screaming to start bagging me and go get somebody with Narcan and go get some help. He assumed that the morphine had knocked out my respiratory drive, and that was a good assumption, but that wasn't the case. After a bunch of people came into the room, including the doctor from earlier, they realized at some point, I think they actually did give me Narcan, and of course it didn't change anything, but when they checked my pupils were blown. I went into full respiratory arrest at that time, and I had no gag reflex. So for the medical people, I had a GCS of 3. Which is dead, basically. So at that time, I guess all the puzzle pieces were finally together, and they knew that my brain was herniating, and that is also something that you don't come back from. And to explain the mechanisms of what happened, I'm going to try to break it down a little. So this is the part where if I get something wrong, feel free to correct me, and I'll pin your comment. So what happened was I had a delayed onset of hydrocephalus. What that means is, and the way it's been explained to me, is that my injury was so severe, it changed the way my brain was seated. And so it had kind of shifted a little bit, and it occluded the outflow of my CSF. And over time, my ventricles started to enlarge, and that causes pressure on the brain, and it causes the brain to swell. Well, that would explain the headache and the vomiting and all of that. But also, when your brain swells, it gets to a point where it has nowhere to go. And unless they relieve that pressure, it's going to take the path of least resistance. And I know that there's several different ways your brain can herniate, but I don't know all of the ways. The one that I'm familiar with is at the base of your skull, you have a hole called a foramen magnum. That's where your spinal cord and all these... Sorry about that. I had to put Bailey on his perch. Maybe he'll be quiet. Okay. So I guess I'm going to back up a little bit since Bailey so rudely interrupted me. So basically what happens is the brain starts to swell and it has nowhere to go, but there's this large hole at the base of your skull, and it can cause the brain to herniate down that way. And when that happens, it kills you. So my brain had started to herniate due to that delayed onset of hydrocephalus that got missed. Now, see, I told you who would be screaming. So now that I've explained what it is, if you look in the literature, because I've asked my neurosurgeon, I've asked this question so many times: why did this get missed? How did this get missed? And it got missed because it's so rare. It wasn't even on anybody's radar. When you look in the medical literature, I think I saw one other case, and it was different than mine. So how were they supposed to even register that this could be happening? I do know now that their policies have changed as far as when neuro is releasing a patient. I don't know all the details, but I do know things have changed and they have learned from this. But there's no blame here. I want to make that very clear. We never saw that physician again the whole time I was in the hospital, and I'm sure the hospital was concerned about litigation, and I want to make it very clear, again, that is not the intention of this. I'm not suing anybody. I won the lottery because I survived it. I'm here, living my life. I had the best outcome imaginable. So it was missed because it was such a rare complication. It's not even there was just no way for them to know. Based off of my presentation and the symptoms, should my head have been scanned? Yeah, it should have, but it wasn't. And I'll talk more about that at the end of this video. So after I went to respiratory arrest, they figured out it was hydrocephalus. I was herniating, and they tried to re-intubate me and couldn't, obviously, because I was in a halo and I was dying. So they had to do an emergency crike at bedside, which is where I got this. And what happened was, it was an emergency. Everybody was stressed. Everybody was trying to save my life. Everybody was freaking out. Well, at some point I was on propofol to keep me sedated. My understanding is that the airway took too long. Understandably, I was in a halo, that's an impossible intubation. I mean, I don't know about impossible, but I would not want to intubate a patient in a halo, so I get it. But during all of that, if you watch, so Lee and I did a video on this months ago. I haven't rewatched it, but we talked about this, but we did get some things wrong because we didn't have some of the answers that we have now. But if you watch that video, or you've read my blog, or you've heard me talk about it, then you know that I woke up at some point during all of this. And I always thought that I woke up in the OR, but I didn't. I woke up at bedside, and what must have happened was, during all of the commotion, my propofol ran out and I woke up, and what felt to me like an eternity was probably only 10 seconds or less before it was caught, and then they put me back out. But what happened was, I woke up, I couldn't move, I was paralyzed, but I could hear everything, and I still remember the things that I heard. I remember the panic in people's voices. I remember the sound of things being thrown around and shuffled around, specifically the sound of medical instruments. I know that's oddly specific, but that's what I remember. So what they did was they did the crite, and they put in an EVD, which is a temporary device to remove the fluid and pressure off my brain to save my life. And I woke up, I could feel everything, I could hear everything, and I realized that they didn't know that I was awake. And so I put every ounce of mental fortitude I had, because I thought if I can wiggle a finger, they'll know that I'm here. And somehow I managed to I wiggled my right index finger, and I heard someone say she's wiggling her finger, and I thought that they didn't catch it. And so I thought, well, screw this, I'm gonna die, I can't do this anymore. And so I tried to will myself to die. It sounds weird to say that out loud, but I did. I could not. I actively tried to will myself to die in that moment because it was horrific. But they did see me move my finger, and they must have turned my propofol back on, and then I eventually was unconscious again. But that little window right there has stuck with me and was very traumatic. I do have some PTSD, nothing crazy, but just every time I have to have a surgery and I start hearing those sounds like in the OR before they put that, and they've been really good. I've explained the situation to them and they've been great, but that's the only time that really comes up. But so back to the story. So the brain herniation put me into a coma, and I was entered into the referral system to be an organ donor. And so that brought in another team that actually my sister works for, and they were following me and evaluating me to be an organ donor. But fortunately, 2 days later, I woke up, and then we started recovering from all of that. I understandably had a long, difficult, traumatic experience in the ICU. After all of that, it added a lot onto my recovery. But the fact that I survived that and neurologically intact is astonishing. I don't know how that's possible. I'm not a religious person, but I know what everybody's going to say. That's fine, but it truly is a medical anomaly. Everything that happened to me is a medical anomaly. I'm telling y'all are going, like, this, without my name, I'm going to be in a lot of medical literature. In fact, my case has been presented all over the country already by neurosurgery conferences and whatnot. So they're already talking about me, so I might as well talk to you guys about my experience. I recently had the opportunity to speak at the Trauma Survivors Network event the other day at UAB, and I got to meet the doctor that was there that day. And I never in a million years thought I would get to meet this doctor, because I assumed that she would be terrified of, repercussions and whatnot. But she actually came up to me and introduced herself after the speech, and we got a few minutes to ourselves to talk, and it was really powerful for me. I imagine it was for her as well. Anybody in the medical field that tells you they've never made a mistake is lying. It's called practicing medicine for a reason. And I know that because of that situation, they have changed the way that they do things. I don't know all the details, but they did learn from it. It was not just a, and forgotten about. And I got to speak to the doctor, and I cannot believe she actually used the word mistake. I was very careful about what I said to her, because I did not want her to feel like I was upset with her or pointing fingers. And so I was kind of fumbling for my words a little bit, and she could tell when I wanted to say mistake, I kind of stopped myself, and she said it was a mistake. I made a mistake. And to hear her say that was so powerful and important for me. I think that it helped me move on. I have not talked a lot about this because I didn't want to deal with people pointing fingers and saying that we should sue. Like, none of that is going to happen. I am so incredibly grateful to be here. I'm grateful that when it was caught, it was treated correctly. If I was anywhere else on the planet other than where I was when that happened, I would not be here sitting in front of you today. And I wanted her to know, and I did get to tell her in person, that I know that she will carry that day with her for the rest of her career. I also know that she will never make that mistake again. So what good would it do for anybody for us to sue or try to ruin somebody's career? I know, and I am confident after talking to her how impactful that was on her as a person, on her as a physician. And I'm confident in saying that I know that this made her a better physician. I think that she will probably listen to family members more. I mean, I don't know. We didn't get into specifics, but she did say, make it a point to tell me that your husband was fighting fiercely for you. And I told her, I said, well, that's what I've heard. So we had a great heart-to-heart and hugged several times. There were tears, and I'm incredibly grateful to her for having the courage to come up and talk to me about it. And I understand why those conversations don't happen more, because of fear of litigation. And I totally, sorry, told you I'm having a hard time with my neck today. But I understand why these conversations can't happen, but I am incredibly grateful that conversation did happen. It was incredibly impactful and powerful for me and my healing, and it made me feel more comfortable telling this story now, because I can say that we have resolved everything, and these are just the facts of what happened. These are the lessons learned, and I'm okay. She's going to be I'm sure she is an amazing physician. I really don't know anything else about her, but she was incredibly kind, and I could just tell she was very sincere, and I know she'll carry this with her forever. And I'm grateful, obviously, for myself that I'm here to talk about it, and I'm grateful for her that I'm here to talk about it. If I had not made it through that, or if I had devastating neurological deficits from that would be a lot harder for me and her. But fortunately for both of us, it did not turn out that way, and a lot of lessons were learned. Procedures and policies were changed, and now there's new literature, I'm sure, in the medical journals about my case specifically. So that is my hydrocephalus story. It was a delayed onset that resulted in a coma. It was an unheard of complication. It was a freak thing. It's interesting. It was terrible and traumatic, and I'm telling you, there's going to be a book about this one day. But if you stayed with me for this whole video, I appreciate you, and I want to give a great big shout out to my channel members, my All-Star and VIP members. You guys are amazing. The faith that you have in me to become a channel member, it means everything to me. If you are interested in becoming a channel member, I would love to have you. I will put the link for that in the description. I also, after this speech, I got to talk to other survivors. I got to talk to several physicians, and I really got a lot of clarity in how I want to move forward with this channel. And I want to start interviewing and talking to other survivors who are at different places in their journey, and maybe together we can use this YouTube channel to mentor, to share our stories, to help and encourage other people. But to do that, and to do it correctly, and to do it in a professional way, I will need some more equipment, like better audio, things like that. So I think I'm going to start an Amazon wish list with some of the things. And I've got a room in my house that eventually I really want to turn into a studio for filming YouTube content, podcast stuff. So I have the space, I just don't have all the equipment, and I would really like to, I feel like this could be very impactful as I get more involved with the Trauma Survivors Network and meet more people. I would love to use this platform to get these conversations out around the world to other people that may need them. So I will start an Amazon wish list, and I will put some things on that. If you are just happen to be somebody with a ton of money laying around, you never know. You never know who's watching your videos. So I will put that. Also, I will put a link down below to, it's called Buy Me a Coffee, but it's just a way that you can like tip a content creator for if you like their content, if you like the video, I would appreciate that. But yeah, that's really where I see this channel going. I already have several people in mind and that have agreed to come on here, and I look forward to doing that. I'm very excited about the future of this channel. I'm also very concerned about the state of my neck and if I am going to have my neck surgery sooner rather than later, but that is for another video. So big week this week. My daughter is graduating high school. I am very emotional, just the fact that I'm here to see it. And then right after her graduation, I'm flying to Daytona, and I'm going to take you with me because I've had a very embarrassing foot problem since my accident, and I'm going to Daytona. My sister-in-law is flying me down there, and we're going to get my feet fixed, and I am so excited about that. I am very embarrassed about it, but I'm going to take you with me and share it, because by being transparent and open about all these things, I think it can help other people who are also going through something similar. And then after that, we are going on a big family camping trip in Florida, and I am excited to bring you with us on that. I look forward to putting together a vlog, not for the views, but just I really like the creativeness of video editing, and this will be a good project for me to really see how far I've come on that. And if you've been here since the beginning, then you can probably vouch that, I mean, I'm not like the best, but I've grown. I've come a long way. I've really put a lot of effort into improving this channel. So I think I have talked a long time on this video, and you probably need a break from me, but genuinely, thank you for being here. If you are struggling, if you're having a bad day, if you are early on in your recovery from something horrible, just know that there's a good day coming. It may not be tomorrow or the next day, but you will have a good day. This won't last forever. Just hang in there, and I will see you all very soon. I'm going to be talking about oh my Lord. We didn't even last 5 minutes, Bailey. Let's try this again. Do you want to say something? Speak. Say boobies. What's Daddy's favorite thing? Boobies.